Hi everyone, welcome to our energy efficiency and tenant engagement webinar. Thanks for joining us this morning. My name is Stacey Dingwall and I'm one of the SVHE policy leads. I'm really pleased to welcome Shane Donnellan, who's Senior Consultant in Behaviour Change and Engagement at Changeworks for today's webinar. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, it's great to have you. And as always, the recording of the webinar will be available on our website alongside the slides from today's session. And before I pass over to Shane, just a couple of housekeeping announcements before we get started. You won't have audio enabled, but you can ask a question at any point using the Q&A function on your control panel, and then Shane will be taking any questions after the presentation. You will also notice that your control panel has a chat function, and please use this if you want to share any observations or thoughts with other attendees, but please don't use it for questions as they may get lost in the conversation thread. Just remember to put them in the Q&A function. The chat function has been working really well in our other webinars, so if you can type and listen, I would really encourage you to use that as we go along today. That's all from me. Thank you again for joining us. I hope you enjoyed today's session, and now I'll hand over to Shane to get started.
So thank you for signing in. Hopefully everyone can hear and see me okay. So I'm going to be talking about tenant engagement and energy efficiency. It's going to actually be a bit more broad, not just energy efficiency. Hopefully kind of talking about tenant engagement in the round so that people can apply it to their own personal circumstances, their own roles, challenges, etc. My name is Shane Donnellan. As Stacey said, I work with the consultancy team in Changeworks. So I have a background in clinical psychology and worked for a number of years in that field before doing a master's in human factors, which kind of brought me to where I am working with Changeworks at the moment. Sorry, I'm just ensuring that everyone can hear me, no problems. Okay, great. So Changeworks, for anyone who isn't aware, we're Scotland's leading charity for low carbon living. We do a lot of work with housing associations, local authorities, third private sector bodies. So we have an affordable warrant team, do a lot of tenant engagement, work around kind of decarbonisation and renewable technologies, heat pumps, etc. Do a lot of training and kind of behaviour change, engagement, that kind of stuff. So I'm tasked with much of that. We've been kind of building behaviour change and kind of a psychological approach into a lot of the work we do, so that we're really considering who we're communicating with, how we're engaging, whether our messaging is correct, that kind of thing. So we kind of aim to apply that to a lot of our projects. Do a lot of install work of insulation measures, and this is just a report for district heat analysis we did for a housing association fairly recently. So over the next 45-50 minutes, I'm going to introduce the behavioural approach to tenant engagement, go through some easily applicable techniques for written or verbal, face-to-face, digital comms. Face-to-face isn't happening as much at the moment, but hopefully there'll be some take-home things that can be kind of applicable post-pandemic. And as I kind of just touched on at the start, these are kind of top level. Some of them relate to energy efficiency. Some of them are a bit more general. I don't have the expertise that anyone else has in terms of, you know, asset management or a tenant liaison specialist project officer. So it's about taking these and kind of taking them and running with them, seeing where they fit in with your own individual roles. So there are a number of pitfalls that get in the way of engagement, that stop it being effective, that stop people remembering how to do it, that means that it's just the wrong message. And we're all kind of familiar with these, but we're also probably guilty of some of these just at times. So some of them, if you throw enough information, some of it will stick. So that kind of idea of if we build it, they will come. We see this repeatedly of just banging the same drum with messaging, but if people aren't acting on it, well, it's not working. The all-knowing tenant, so just assuming that the person you're communicating with kind of has access to everything you have access to, or has all the information available and should just make a rational decision. Actual fact, there could be a slight little breakdown in the chain, which is leading to them not doing kind of what it is that's been asked or whatever it might be. Same approaches lead into the same responses. So, if something's not working and you keep trying it and you keep trying it, you can't really expect it to be different. Only thinking about the content, not the context. Who is delivering the message, or the means of delivery, or the timing, or the framing. So there's an example here just in the image, which hopefully comes up. Okay, so this was a Guardian article recently. Coronavirus could cause fall in global CO2 emissions. Yeah, undoubtedly not bad news, but whether it needs the Disneyland Palace with fireworks, maybe not quite. So it's kind of missing the mark, just a little bit insensitive to people affected by coronavirus. So this is, from a national newspaper, just a kind of an idea of how you can so easily miss the mark by only thinking about the content and not the comms in the round. The next one, I think it, so they think it. We often just assume that because we know something, it's kind of like the all-knowing tenant, just because we're of a certain belief that other people will be or should be. People intentionally doing the wrong thing. This is an interesting one. When someone, when you've asked someone to, say, respond to a letter repeatedly and they keep doing it, and it feels like they're doing it to personally wind you up. You've given them all the information they need, and they just continue to not do it right. What's wrong with them? They must be doing it on purpose. And then the last one, everyone is the same. Assuming that the same responses are needed for everyone. With the pandemic, it's led to kind of shifts and different pressures on people. Increased levels of stress, financial health, mental health issues, worries about the future. People are a bit frustrated. Some people have more time in that they maybe are not working or they're working from home. Some people have less time as a result of that. It's this kind of strange push and pull. I think we're all probably finding it. But these are important because they're influencing then how individuals are receiving the messages that we're sending them, how we're trying to engage with them. People are maybe less able to process requests. I'm sure working directly with tenants, some of you are really like seeing this. People just under pressure and being a bit overwhelmed by it all. A bit more distracted perhaps, easy overwhelmed, more reactive, bit more maybe passionate about certain things. And being understandably kind of very wound up. So some of that frustration may be coming through in comms back to you. So the behavioral approach is simply, it's kind of just thinking about people and thinking, well, we've got a huge amount going on in our lives. Everyone's really, really busy. There's a million and one little decisions you have to make over the course of your day. So we take little shortcuts. We just we go on autopilot a lot of the time. If you're, well, whoever remembers driving to work, but driving to work, often you don't kind of make every single decision, put on my indicators, turn left here, go around the roundabout. It just kind of happens and you just get from A to B without ever fully engaging. So the behavioral approach is just kind of working with some of these, the fact that our brains are a little bit lazy. So if we can just help people along, we can help them to make better decisions. So with tenants, it might be helping them to remember to pay their rent or to turn down their energy, or a reminder that we've provided them with information about their waste disposal, now to just enact it. So just taking little cues to kind of help people along, nudge them. So nudges are the kind of tools we have in our arsenal to help people make decisions. I suppose it's called lots of different things: behavioral insights, behavioral science. They're little cues but they don't stop the person from making their own choices. They can be digital, how choices are presented to us. We can include them in letters or even in kind of our verbal comms when we're aware of them. So we're going to go through a couple of examples. It'll become a little bit more clear in the next slide or two. And nudges are kind of ever present, whether we're in the pandemic or on the other side of it. So examples, this was a council somewhere in England, quite common. Their green bins are double the size of their regular bins, kind of moving people towards recycling more, being a bit more conscious of their waste. You've got limited space in your bin, so therefore everything you're putting in landfill, you need to really think about kind of consciously. So that's reducing waste, increasing recycling, and reducing the cost then for the local authority. Text reminders for appointments. You know, you have a doctor's appointment coming up and you get a text saying, don't forget. And it's not to force you to go, it's just because people do forget, people are human. So it's this idea of just little kind of brain hacks to help people come along. They're just real insignificant, real cheap little things to apply. High priority emails, you get a big red exclamation mark on an important email. But if you get loads of them, obviously then they kind of cease to be important. Letters stamped by government, there's a reason that's done that, is to show you, you know, open this, pay attention to this particular letter. Road markings, again, just to kind of direct you. Supermarket layouts, we're, you know, all familiar with the kind of sweets and chocolate near the cash register when you're a bit hungrier and you have to queue past it anyway. It's just quite easy to pick up and grab. 2 for 1, buy one get one free. These are all ways of just kind of increasing sales. Or blood donation. When you're registering your car with the DVLA, it says, do you want to sign up to donate? And that increases blood donations by something, it's insane amounts, 400 or 500%, just because it's kind of reminding people. People have kind of intended on doing it, but haven't quite got around to it. So you kind of might be thinking, understandably, how is any of this related to what you do? These are totally out of field. Hopefully just illustrating some of the impacts of nudges and the kind of behavioural approach. Plenty of other examples. So some examples with housing associations and ourselves that I've come across. Reducing rent arrears with reminder texts. So this is just a, you know, kind of a trial where tenants were sent texts reminding them about rent. I know it sounds so simple, and tenants are obviously faced with so many challenges. It's not just about forgetting to pay the rent, but it was found that just by simply kind of reminding it and trialing different wording, it had impacts, you know, and kind of over the amount of tenants, the impacts really stack up. Wheatley Group ran a trial. There's information available online, or if anyone's interested, you can contact me about missed maintenance appointments, and they tried a few different words, the wording of different letters, to try and reduce that, and until they kind of hit on one that was working. Changeworks have done some training for the housing officers with City of Edinburgh Council. Kind of a lot of the content that I'll be covering over the next wee while. Just kind of how to apply that in face-to-face engagement to try and I suppose encourage tenants to act in a certain way, trying to change their behaviour essentially. And some work we've been doing with Changeworks is to try and reduce no-shows, which are obviously kind of a waste of resource. This would be for home visit, and then the tenant may end up kind of going to the back of a queue. So it's a work in progress. We're still kind of trialing different things to just, in terms of leaving letters saying, you know, sorry, we called, you weren't in, and kind of personalizing them and just making them a little bit more real for the tenant, as opposed to it being an appointment that they feel they can kind of miss. So I've kind of grouped the tools that you yourselves can hopefully take on board into 3 really simple kind of umbrella terms: making it easy, personalize, and social norms. Some of these people will be doing already. Some of them might be a little bit different. So don't, the fact that they look so simple there, don't let that deter you. Because there's kind of people coming from all different angles signed up to the webinar. These are like kind of quite top level, but hopefully you'll see how they relate to you, or maybe they don't. So making it easy. Every tiny barrier a person meets reduces their chance of taking action. So if we can make choices or behaviors really, really easy, remove every tiny little seemingly insignificant barrier for a customer, for a tenant, they're more likely to be able to see it through. So these are things we just take for granted. And the language we use is very important. If we're using kind of big jargony words, that in itself will be a barrier. You know, people are less likely to act on that. That's kind of 101 stuff, but you'd be surprised at just how often these little mistakes are made. So kind of just being aware of them. Okay, how can we make it as easy as possible? In terms of the language, things like, you know, we want your views, offer support, here's some tips about your community, local, you in your homes, not things like opinions or struggling or debt, fuel poverty, households. In kind of our experience working with people in fuel poverty, they tend not to talk about being in fuel poverty. They talk about not being able to pay the bills or the gas getting cut off. So kind of using that language and kind of relaying it back to people just kind of weaves the story. You're not coming at it from a totally strange angle for people. Kind of leading on from that, so keeping things simple, easy to act on, easy to remember. Comms, a single call to action. What is it we want the person to do? Be really clear. We're not putting 10 different things in the same letter. What is the purpose of it? And as I've said, kind of language and imagery that people can just immediately relate to and make sense to them. An example, a pretty recent one of how not to do it. So this was the Westminster released social distancing kind of infographic to prompt people to socially distance. So keep 1 bed, 2 benches, 3 fridges, 4 chairs apart. It's just kind of breaching all the rules we've just gone through. It's not simple. It's not using language that people can kind of relate to. There's 4 separate messages in there. Who knows what the length of 3 fridges is? It's just really, really poor communications, and that's, you know, without just having pop shots at the Westminster government. On a scale, when this is kind of a national comms, it really leads to confusion, and there can be massive implications. Kind of then comparing that with some other countries who've had really clear, succinct messaging. I think Scotland's been a lot better on that kind of thing. But just pausing for a second and thinking, who's reading this? How are they making sense of it? How can we expect someone to immediately just know this or kind of bring this to mind? In terms of written and digital comms, there's lots of little things we can do to just simplify it, just boil it right back down. As few steps as possible, not sending someone from pillar to post, you know, where they have to get different codes, and it's nearly like a treasure hunt online. Obviously people aren't going to see that through. Bitly, so bit.ly is a website, just free to use. You don't need to sign up. And if you've got a, say, a hyperlink, maybe a survey or something that has lots of capital letters and numbers and symbols, really big and complicated, that in itself can be just a barrier for people. People are less likely to click on it. By putting it through Bitly, you can enter your own kind of URL so that it's easy understood. People can click on it. So little things like this increase the click-through rate quite a bit by just removing the kind of the visual barrier, even though it's the exact same thing that's needed by the tenant. Pre-populated fields, it's not always an option, but if, say, someone has received an email which then has a link and leads into a form, if any of the bits can be pre-populated, even name or address, it reduces the barrier for the individual and greatly increases the chances of them making it through and completing it all. Every last little thing you ask of someone reduces the chances of them kind of making it to the end. Limited choices. So I think sometimes we think that by giving as many choices as possible, we're improving people's ability to make informed decisions. Not always. People get really overwhelmed. 3 choices, 4 choices where possible. If you're doing even a kind of a rating scale rather than giving a 1 to 10, 1 to 5, so much easier. People can just indicate their preference. Identify your call to action, and state it clearly. So single, what is the purpose? I'm repeating myself already because it's just so important. Just one message. What is it you want from the person? Make it really clear. Even this week, there was a piece of communication that Changeworks is putting out, and it said head to our website to find out more, or if you've any questions. And then somewhere else it said register today. And so that was 3 different things that on a simple email that didn't know what it was doing. Less text, less detail and less explanations. So again, with the best of intentions, I think we often really explain things. We know that some people have limited understanding or might be a little bit overwhelmed. So we try and provide them with as much info as possible so that they can, we're not forcing their hand. But if you get an email and there's big blocks of text, people don't read it. They find it just a barrier. So boil it back down, cut out like every sentence, every paragraph, every even word that you can remove and just make things that wee bit shorter are less of a barrier for people, particularly those with kind of lower literacy levels. So many other things we can do. Presentation is also key. So the next slide. The information here is the exact same as this one here. Just kind of, obviously it's a complete mess. Using different text fonts, different sizes, colors. You don't know where to look or what's going on with it. So just being kind of aware of how we're presenting information, either in an email or a text, a letter, is key. Some examples of making it easy. If you've ever tried to get a tax rebate, chances are you didn't find it the most simple thing. Lots of numbers, lots of security, total hack. I think that's because if they made it too easy, everyone would do it. So by making it a bit more challenging, people just don't bother. The government saves loads of money. Maybe that's just the cynic in me, I don't know. Go to our website, get our phone number. You see this kind of everywhere. Why? I'm already at your website. So this idea of just sending people around the country isn't helpful. Like, share, and comment to win. There's 3 things you're asking there. Maybe like and share might be sufficient, and you're still getting kind of customers or tenants to engage. This is obviously a kind of a soft example, quite removed from some of the more challenging comms that you'd be having. But just really thinking about what every last thing we're asking. Double clicks, single clicks. So there's research suggesting that when we have to double click on something, on a link online, the drop-off rate is much higher than a single click. So that tiny little barrier on an unconscious level just kind of limits people seeing it through. Enter your name, contact details, age, and favorite color, or similar examples like this. What is the purpose of each bit of information we need? Do we need to ask all of those? Often we kind of ask people, maybe your name, your benefit status, contact details, age, gender. And maybe there's a couple of those things that we don't actually need. We're just asking them because we're used to asking them. If that's the case, cut them out. So we've got loads of ways you can get in touch with us. You can phone, email, or text, or write to us, or visit us, or fax us. And this is just a little bit overwhelming. So even though it's intended to kind of offer access. It just, people don't know where to look. So pare that back, phone us if this is a problem for you, maybe here's an alternative. During the pandemic, so a couple of things that to help make our comms a bit easier and therefore a bit more effective. Stamped addressed envelopes may be useful for people kind of with limited digital access. Kind of writing to people and expecting them to respond by mail with the best will in the world, they could just very easily forget it. Most homes have that shelf or bowl for letters that you mean to get around to dealing with, and they just kind of stack up. Providing an SAE is one way of just reducing that barrier. Maybe people don't want to go into a shop and buy stamps themselves. So just one thing, WhatsApp, it's I know there's a number of housing associations been kind of looking into using WhatsApp. We're just starting to trial it with our affordable warrant team. Seemingly the initial responses are quite positive in that it's just tenants are pretty used to WhatsApp. It's no biggie for people. Everyone, or the majority of people, have a smartphone. They're used to it. It's just not a kind of a, it's not like things were even 5 years ago where that would have been a quite exclusive kind of means of communication. It's obviously not for everyone, but it does seem to be kind of becoming more widely adopted. So just in the same way that like a liaison officer might text tenants, WhatsApp does seem to be suitable with GDPR concerns if there's group chats. Redeploying staff to cover phones and social media. More people are stressing out at home, due to financial issues, health issues, and no one seems to be getting through to anyone in terms of, I just even from my own experiences of contacting internet provider and stuff over the last wee while, my bank, no one's picking up the phone, which kind of leads to my frustration. And these are only small issues, but I suppose for tenants who are really experiencing challenges, just having someone on the end of the phone or live chat or whatever can potentially help alleviate some of the problems. And new approaches, looking at organizations business as usual, whether that's accepting card or doing things remotely, or it's a weird time, but if people aren't, if there isn't a little bit of give and take, you see kind of some councils and stuff who have refused to have any AGMs, or at least they were early on in the lockdown, because it was in their constitution that they couldn't, but then no decisions were being made and things were just completely going astray. People's hands have been forced. There is a bit of a need to make some changes. So that was kind of making it easy. The next one, make it personal. Yeah, we all know personal comms going to be a bit more effective. So in comms, emphasize both yourself and the personal element of yourself and the tenant. So for the tenant, we're interested in things that relate to us. They motivate us more than generic things. So if we feel something is personal and relevant to us, it's going to be a bit more of a motivator. More specific, the better. So in this example, a letter, say, to West Pilton residents is going to be slightly more effective than Edinburgh residents. The more you can kind of zone in for individual people, if it's tenants in a particular block, that'll be more effective than saying, dear housing association tenant, people in your block. So really focus it in, and mention the person in the comms. So things like, you can reduce your bills by, instead of kind of the more abstract save money by. I think this is something that people will be really aware of. Hopefully just a useful reminder. Really emphasize this is what you can do. We're here to help you. Excuse me. And also emphasize yourself. So I think we're generally pretty good at thinking about the other person that we're engaging with or communicating with, but don't forget yourself. we're more likely to engage and listen to people rather than organizations or their partners. So really talk about yourself. This example here, just a Tesco self-service machine. If it malfunctioned and when you were getting your shopping, it gave you an extra tenner. A lot of people, I think, and I'm not gonna do a poll on it, but a lot of people would think, great, you know, not a bad day. This cool, I'll take that. Thank you very much. I think I definitely would. Whereas if a cashier made a mistake and gave you an extra tenner, people would be more likely to say, actually, I think this isn't mine, even though they all work for Tesco. And it's just this idea that we are the personal side of things is kind of key in shaping our decisions. So bring yourself to the party. Talk about yourself. If you're say on the phone, I understand how you're feeling, or yes, that like it sounds to me. Mention yourself, that like it's a two-way dialogue. It's not just the organization to the person. Highlight what you have personally done or might do for the tenant. Great. So I've sent you those forms. Now what I need you to do is to send them back, and then I will check or I will follow up with you. And you don't need to be face-to-face to be personal. I mean, particularly relevant with the pandemic, but within texts, emails, letters, you can really emphasize the person leading the comms rather than your team or your organization. These are just kind of mock-up letters, really, really simple letters, just to kind of illustrate some of the points about making it easy and making it personal. So the first letter, dear householder, ABC Housing are completing boiler checks in your area next week. Please notify us if this is an issue and we can reschedule. Thanks. So fairly straightforward. There's nothing offensive there, and there's nothing wrong per se, but maybe a more effective way might be the following. So, dear Mrs. Smith, we were kind of personalizing it. We're completing boiler checks on Murray Road. Again, zoning it in, making it kind of relevant to that person. The language is a little bit more normal or kind of everyday language. So the person, it kind of fits with how a person would talk rather than it being totally official. The signature, even if it's a digital signature, it looks like a signature. It's swirly lettering and in a different font. And I know that sounds so stupid. Obviously, everyone knows it's not a real signature if it's been emailed. But these little cues can just kind of tap into our unconscious, and it feels like it's coming from a person whose name is there as well, as opposed to it just being the housing team. So, total mock-up letter, but just tiny little things. There's scope within so much of our comms to make it easier or make it a bit more personal. Which brings us on to social norms. I think that should be number 3. So we're social creatures. We tend to do what people around us are doing, or pretty importantly, what we think they are. So this is the the kind of keeping up with the Joneses is a really important influence of all of our behavior and our decision making and kind of what we do. So by emphasizing this, we can nudge people along to making decisions. If you're in a shop and you've to purchase something, you don't know which brand to go for, but you see that one of them is selling out, and you're not too certain. But if everyone else is going for it, well, they can't all be wrong, and you're much more likely to kind of go for the one that people are already going for. Here's a sign about litter reduction. Take your litter home. Other people do. It's really stressing. This is the done thing. You don't want to be that one person who's littering. So yeah, don't be that one person. Or drink driving. What's been really effective in reducing drink driving in the last couple of years is the kind of the cultural norm. The fact that now if someone went to drive home from the pub, other people would challenge them and say, no, you can't do that. That's not what we do. Whereas a couple of years ago, it was more accepted, even though the risk was the exact same. So these social norms really impactful in our behaviors and influencing people. So kind of how do we apply them? If the norm is positive, shout about it. So yeah, tell people, you know, thanks to everyone who has done this. You know, 5 out of 10 people, well, maybe that's not so positive, 6 out of 10, probably a better example. You know, thanks to everyone who has already, the majority of people are relate the norm to your target or audience as much as possible. So kind of linking up to what I've been talking about earlier, make it really specific, so that people see, okay, this is what the people in my neighborhood or in my block or the people that I relate to, this is what they're doing. Okay, I should be doing it. And if something isn't good, be careful. So say there's issues with rent repayments, saying things like, you know, dear tenants, 90% of people haven't paid on time this month. Then you're totally licensing the people who have paid to go, oh, I don't know why I'm bothering because other people aren't doing it. And this happens on a totally subconscious level. But if the norm isn't great, just be careful with kind of emphasizing it. So phrases, most people, 60%, thanks to those who have already. Only 20% have still to pay. So this might be kind of with say the renter example, where this is kind of flipping it. Rather than saying 80% of people haven't done it, we say only 20% have. You know, this is really small. Don't be part of this group, be part of the kind of majority. We're expecting a big turnout, so sign up early. I think I prepared this slide before we were all in lockdown, and so on. There's plenty of other examples. So just kind of what this might look like in email text, say, thanks to everyone who's returned their forms. This allows us to, we would appreciate if the last few could. Yeah, we're really implying that whoever hasn't done it is a minority, they're breaking the norm. Most tenants living in the block pay their rent on time as per letting agreement. Could the few tenants with rent outstanding please pay? You know, we're expecting this. Again, I'm caveating this that these are kind of just mocked up examples, and there could be a million reasons that people aren't paying. But the kind of principles are there. This is an example that we've had at Changeworks. As I say, we've been kind of trying to build this behavioral approach into a lot of our comms and into a lot of our projects and just what we're doing. So we kind of review a lot of letters with this in mind and just try and kind of find improvements where we can. So this was a before and after letter that was sent to householders, and I'll explain it a little bit on the next slide, kind of what is the purpose of it. Don't worry about kind of trying to read all the letters. It's not hugely interesting. We're asking for meter readings, but you know, from a kind of initial glance, the two letters are very similar. This one isn't drastically different to the first one. All that is different is kind of some of the wording within it. So householders had received wall insulation as part of Scottish Government scheme. We needed to get meter readings to know whether people were warmer in their homes, whether they were using more energy, i.e., you know, is it working? And the kind of means for doing this was sending people the letter we've just seen, but there was a low response rate. And it was kind of understandable why there would be a low response rate. People have signed up, they've had builders in their house, they've now got their wall insulation. There's no motivation for them to send us the meter readings when we ask 3-6 months down the line. We don't have budget to incentivize them. So it's understandable that people just aren't going to kind of get round to it. So what we did, we made the letter a bit more simple. So I'll go back, you can see the hyperlink initially in the red. the first link, it's kind of quite long and lengthy, and bearing in mind that this was being sent as a letter, so people actually had to write this, would have had to type this into their browser. We replaced it with a bit.ly link, which is the blue link. So that was just simpler, it was much easier. And this is something we just kind of totally overlooked. Like, it's clear as day going through it now that, oh yeah, obviously that's a barrier. But these just creep into your comms so easily. We removed the jargon. We didn't talk about kind of monitoring and evaluation. We said, we want to know, is it working? We want to know how well it's working. And a clear call to action. This is what we need to do. Rather than kind of mentioning it in 3 different places or having a few different ones. We changed the tone a little bit, just through kind of tiny little words. So it was less of, we'd be ever so grateful if you could send us a meter reading. And it was a little bit more, you've got your insulation, we need a meter reading. Great, we thank you in advance. A little bit more expectant. And norms, we talked about other people submit meter readings. As part of this, householders have to submit meter readings. This is just what we do. You know what I mean? This isn't anything exceptional. And then the results. So in the first quarter, with the exact same group of people, we had 50 responses, and simply by changing the letter, we brought that up to 88, which, I mean, these are fairly small figures, but it's 76% increase just through changing the letter. It took us about 20 minutes to review the letter. It didn't cost us anything, and suddenly we were getting much better data. So that, yeah, just one example that, like, this isn't all kind of academic stuff. It has applications which lead to results. A few more slides just about comms during the pandemic. Acknowledging the difficulties faced by tenants, strangest of these times, goes a long way to kind of couching comms. Just validating people's own experience goes a long way to kind of resolving issues. It's not going to be the silver bullet, but saying, you know, I understand how you're feeling, or this is a very strange time. I appreciate this is difficult for us all. However, and that just kind of couching can really soften then the requests or whatever it is, the purpose of the comms. Compassionate language can aid this and support the relationship. So it doesn't need to be a case of saying, look, things are really tough, so fine, you know, just do as you please. But just little shifts in the language, acknowledging how it's different, compassionate, while still getting to the point. And there's been some research saying that the values that we all kind of share at the moment, so we're all in this together, the practicality. So while things are a bit odd at the moment, we still need you to notify us of repairs, you know, and maintaining continuity. We've done all that we can to try and help things along, to try and keep things ticking over. Now we need you to restoring balance, the role that we all play, and kind of collaboration, or that, like, where everyone's doing their bit kind of thing. In terms of digital engagement, so the crisis has increased the level and quality of digital engagement kind of across the board. There's bits and bobs kind of coming out about that people have been forced to upskill a little bit in terms of digital engagement. There's massive increase in Skype, Teams, Zoom, and same for a lot of householders. It's not just people kind of in work settings. RSLs need to capitalize on this and be ready themselves in-house so that they can kind of deal with these changes, I suppose. I mean, this is preaching to the converted, I'm quite sure, particularly this far on into things. And obviously there are exceptions. Not everyone can kind of use a laptop or has access to a laptop, but there has been kind of a notable shift where people have, their hand has been forced a little bit. So kind of building on this and not as much as we can, I suppose, going forward. So that kind of brings me to the end of my ramblings. The three main things: keeping it easy, make it personal, and using social norms. And then the kind of different things that fall out of them, all of them are low cost and can improve the effectiveness of any kind of comms that you're going to the bother of doing. These are as I say, they're tools. It's up to people how to interpret them or how to apply them, and whether they see how they may fit in to your own roles. So welcome any questions, and my contact details are there. So if anyone has anything that you don't want to maybe ask about now, or just want to pick up on or challenge me on, please feel free to get in touch. Yeah, thanks very much for listening. Hopefully get some questions.
Thank you very much, Shane. That was really great. A lot of tips there, especially I think tenant engagement is always really important to get right at the best of times. But obviously now we're all living in different times, and it's even more important, but we're obviously having to do it in different ways, particularly digitally. And I particularly liked the bits that you talked about just in general, and not using jargon. I suppose it's never good to use jargon, is it? But in terms of using terms like fuel poverty, it's really important to avoid stigmatising people through that. So yeah, I think that's really important, and I'm sure that'll be a good consideration for everyone going forward. So just kind of in terms of how Changeworks have kind of been approaching things, have you, and I know you have kind of like the heads teams and as you said, the affordable warrant teams, so how have they been getting on kind of engaging with people in a more digital way?
I think there's been quite a mix throughout the organisation. So our affordable warrant team have kind of really found some elements challenging in that they can't do home visits. So that was kind of an initial barrier, but something I think that they're gradually improving on in that they're, more tenants are now open to virtual home visits. And while there are like some people who will still require home visits, and that's been done with kind of PPE or has been planned in the future, it's been quite interesting, the move to more digital, which tenants and kind of vulnerable householders have made the leap themselves. Whereas then I kind of, so that's the really vulnerable clients, whereas Home Energy Scotland are reporting quite different in that there's people, so not the really vulnerable people in society, and people who maybe were considering getting wall insulation or getting a heat pump are now potentially not spending their money going out, and they have the time to do it, or they're really eager and impatient to just get started and get some work. So there is also this shift in terms of kind of home improvements linked to energy efficiency or to renewable generation, which is really positive and hopefully will kind of continue on post-pandemic.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that brings us on actually to, we've got a question, helping tenants who are excluded. That's obviously, a big issue. I think we just kind of take it for granted that everyone has access, but as we know, it's really not the case still.
Yeah, there's I think there's just such a spread of people. I know the WhatsApp is one kind of means of, obviously it's still digital, but for people particularly who don't have access to kind of an email and laptop, WhatsApp is kind of a little bit of an in-between. I've always been a believer though in kind of face-to-face comms and the kind of value that they have. And particularly the more vulnerable people, despite this being the new normal and we're being told we're going to be working from home and stuff, I think there is going to need to be face-to-face engagement and home visits. And how many times, you might have an issue with technology or something you've ordered, and going through a chat bot, even though they might provide the same information, or trying to get through to someone on the phone will always win out, and people want to talk to people, and I don't think that's going to change. We're pretty social creatures, so despite it being very strange and much more challenging for housing associations, I think there's still a need, if not more of a need, for interpersonal comms, even if it's not face to face.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose I think that's been a really positive that we've seen the Scottish Government and other kind of funders making available funding to help in cases like this. And I know a lot of our members have been able to access funding through things like the Supporting Communities Fund to, you know, help out with that particular kind of group of tenants who are digitally excluded. So, you know, that I think that's been really helpful as we kind of navigate this new world. Yeah, anyone, any questions that you've got to ask, please do share them in the Q&A function. You know, not just related to COVID, I suppose just ongoing tenant engagement as well. You know, obviously, I think hopefully the First Minister will have some good news for us later today in terms of moving forward through the phases, but I think we all know that this is still going to be an ongoing situation for a while that we'll have to deal with even as we kind of start to get back to a bit of normal. So we will, I suppose, have this kind of blended approach going forward for a while.
Yeah. Yeah, nothing further really to add other than to agree.
Who knows how long we'll be doing this, I suppose.
Yeah. One person had asked there in the Q&A if there could be some acknowledgement that people have attended. The training is CPD certified, so if anyone wants to fire me an email, I can ensure that the certificates get sent out.
All right, okay, great. So this, because I know you do the training sessions, so this I suppose is just kind of the online version of the training session that you would have delivered previously?
Yep.
All right, okay, great, perfect. So yep, we're happy to do that after we've finished the session.
Perfect.
Okay, so I think we'll just call it a day there if no one's got any questions. If anything comes up afterwards, then obviously please feel free to get in touch with us or Shane, and we'll be happy to answer any questions. As well as the certificates, we will also make a recording of the webinar available on the website as soon as we can afterwards, and you'll also be able to access Shane's slides as well. But thank you everyone again for joining us. You can keep an eye on the website for other webinars that we've got upcoming. And we look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you.
Thanks very much everyone for tuning in.